So Bernie Sanders laid out his thoughts on Israel and Palestine in detail here. So let's listen and see if you can notice any differences between his position and, say, Hillary Clinton's position.
You've said that the U.S. should be even-handed when it comes to dealing with the Israelis and the Palestinians. So does that mean that the U.S. should remain neutral to achieve peace?
No, what it means is that if we want lasting peace in the Middle East, we have got to obviously make sure that the security and the independence of Israel remains intact. That is not a debate. Israel must continue to exist as an independent, free state. But if we are going to have lasting peace, we have also got to work with the Palestinians. And what that means, we have got to recognize that for example, in Gaza, you got an unemployment rate of 44%. You have people living in horrific poverty. You have a community that was destroyed. So if we are going to go forward, it cannot be that the United States it takes the side of Israel. We've got to work with both communities to try to do what is very, very difficult, and that is create a lasting peace in the region.
Do you think the U.S. has not been even-handed up till now?
Right, I do not think so. I think that overwhelmingly the United States, time and time again, has looked aside when Israel has done some bad things. I think, for example, that the growth of settlements in Palestinian territory is not acceptable to me and not conducive to the peace process. I think that the kind of destruction that was wreaked on Gaza during that war was way above what needed to be done for military purposes. A lot of civilians were killed. A lot of hospitals and schools and apartments were destroyed above and beyond what had to be done. So look, I think there is no question that there's enough blame to go around on both sides.
Okay, Bernie Sanders is the only one that's even close to being in the realm of reality when talking about this issue. No, it's really amazing because you go and you look at Ted Cruz's rhetoric, Marco Rubio's rhetoric, and Hillary Clinton's rhetoric, and oh my God. Forget it. If you listen to Cruz and Rubio, all Palestinians are terrorists. You listen to Hillary Clinton, BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, and Sanctions movement, to try to force Israel into a peace deal. That is anti-Semitic. And then, obviously, Trump, in classic Trump fashion, flip-flops like nobody's business. He says, I want to be neutral on the issue. And then he goes and gives a speech to AIPAC where he's like, yeah, you guys are right about everything. Let me tell you, Israel's totally right about everything. The Palestinians are the problem. And yeah. And so here's Bernie Sanders. He comes along and he's like, I'm actually going to use my brain here. So look at all of his comments, because all of it matters. Now, he's going to be tarred as, oh my God, anti-Israel. He hates Israel so much. Unbelievable. But look at the very first thing he said. The existence of Israel is non-negotiable. It's going to exist as a free and democratic state. How's that anti-Israel? Not only is that anti-Israel, that's very pro-Israel. It's him saying, yeah, I know, there are many people who say, we want right to return. Not going to happen. And again, I've said this before too. It's not going to happen because it's about as feasible as the U.S. giving all of America back to the Cherokee Indians or the Algonquins or the Iroquois. It's just not, at this point, it's just totally impractical. But does that mean that there should be no peace deal and no Palestinian state? Of course not. Of course not. There should be a peace deal. There should be a Palestinian state. And it should be a reasonable one. It shouldn't be, okay, we'll give you a little sliver of land and shut the fuck up. No, it needs to make sense. Okay? And that's kind of what Bernie's hinting at here. So he says the existence of Israel is non-negotiable, but basically he's implying other things are negotiable, as they should be, and we should have a deal that makes sense for both sides. And then he goes on to say, well, the U.S. looked away when Israel did many, many bad things. That's the truest thing ever said. I mean, the last slaughter that Netanyahu did in Gaza killed, according to the UN, about 80% civilians. Bombed hospitals, bombed schools. There is no defending that. There is no rationalizing. There is no, well, he meant well. Liberal values, only democracy in the Middle East, so what? You're allowed to then bomb schools and hospitals and kill 80% civilians? As long as you say liberal values, then in the name of liberal values, you can do massively illiberal things. How about no? How about that's the dumbest fucking thing I've ever heard, and that's a gigantic contradiction. Liberal values, I get to bomb your schools and hospitals. And oops, I killed 80% civilians. I'm so broken up by that. So, he's calling it out. He's calling it out. And also, for fuck's sake, man, never in U.S. political discourse, when the politicians are talking, when the establishment is talking, you never hear words like occupation, apartheid. How the fuck are you going to talk about Israel-Palestine and that issue without bringing up those words? And Bernie didn't bring up those words, but he did say another never mention in U.S. politics. Settlements. Again, you go back, you listen to Marco Rubio or Ted Cruz, you'll walk away from, if you know nothing about the situation, you'd walk away thinking the Palestinians are occupying the Israelis. But you listen to Bernie Sanders here, and he's like, no, they're expanding with settlements, and that's unacceptable. And that needs to stop immediately, and we need to get to the table and do a peace deal. So he's the only candidate that's even somewhat sane on the issue. And by the way, even he is not perfect, because he did an interview with Chris Hayes earlier on in the night, and when asked about BDS and whether or not it's fair to equate BDS with anti-Semitism, and Chris Hayes was kind of throwing a softball there where he could say, no, of course not. What did he do? He said, well, I think there's some of that. So, this is, U.S. politics 101 here. The best you can hope for on this issue is not even the greatest. And there's also a story from, we covered it maybe a year and a half ago. He was at a town hall when the slaughter was going on and Netanyahu was bombing everything in sight in Gaza. And his line didn't make much sense then. But it appears like he either has gotten more reasonable on the issue, or that one instance of the argument he made was not the best example of his overall position, or whatever it is. But long story short, he's the most reasonable, and he's reasonable because he's saying, let's be neutral and try to broker a peace deal. I love how that's controversial. Now that's controversial. It's controversial in America to say, let's try to broker a peace deal, let's be neutral, let's be even-handed to both sides and sit down at the table and really iron out the details. You have to admit that you're massively biased in favor of Israel before you're taken seriously in U.S. politics. How absurd. And then they think they're naive enough to think, we'll get a peace deal that way too. Or maybe not. Maybe it's all a facade. Maybe they say, yeah, we totally want peace. Even though everything we say is massively pro-Israel and against the Palestinians. But yeah, we're in favor of peace. It might be that too.